If we already know what matters, why is it still so difficult to follow through? You know the importance of thinking long term, of building something that lasts, of making decisions that will still make sense years from now. And yet, knowing does not always translate into action. Consistency breaks, priorities shift, short-term demands take over. So, here's the big question. What turns long-term thinking into something real? Because the challenge is rarely clarity, it is execution. This episode is about that gap, the space between knowing and doing, and what it takes to close it. Welcome to The Strategic Thinker, TST for short. If you are a returning listener, thank you for being here. If this is your first time with us, I'm glad you found your way here. TST is a sanctuary for your mind, a calm space away from the noise where you can pause, think more deeply, and reset your direction. Every conversation here is designed to help you approach life, work, and decisions with more intention and more clarity. I'm Alan, your host. Let's dive in. In the previous episode, we explored why long-term thinking is so rare in our world. We looked at the speed trap, how modern systems pull us toward immediacy, how compounding requires time, and why direction matters more than short-term results. That conversation created awareness. It helps us see the environment more clearly. It helps us notice patterns we may have overlooked. But awareness on its own does not change outcomes. It's about what comes next. Because long-term thinking only becomes real when it is lived, when it shows up in how we make decisions, how we spend our time, and how consistently we follow through. So today, we explore the gap between knowing and doing, and what it takes to close it. Long-term thinking is rarely limited by knowledge. Most people already know what matters. They know the importance of health, of building meaningful work, of investing in relationships, of making decisions that will still make sense years from now. Clarity is often present. Consistency is where the challenge begins, and this is worth sitting with for a moment. Because most of us carry a quiet gap between what we know and what we actually do. It rarely announces itself. It shows up in the small, ordinary moments of a day, the moments where the easier path and the better path are not the same thing. In those moments, action is shaped by more than logic. It's shaped by our emotion. Immediate rewards feel stronger. Convenience feels easier. And slowly, without any single dramatic decision, intention begins to drift. We drift towards the easier path instead of the better one. We've all felt this. The evening you plan to work on something meaningful and the pull of something easier won instead. The commitment you made to yourself on a Sunday that felt distant by Wednesday. The version of your future self you were building toward, quietly set aside just for today. Just for today has a way of becoming a pattern, and this is the gap between knowing and doing. It does not appear dramatically. It builds through small choices, choosing what feels good now over what matters later, responding to what is urgent instead of committing to what is important, delaying what requires effort, even when it aligns with where you are trying to go. These moments feel minor, but they add up, and over time, they shape your life more than any single decision ever could. This is why awareness is only a starting point. Knowing what to do does not remove this tension. It simply makes you more aware of it. And that awareness presents a choice. to follow what is easy or to follow what matters. Once you see this gap clearly, a new question emerges. How do I make it easier to do what I already know matters? Now we see the gap between knowing and doing. The path forward becomes clearer. It's about designing better. Because here is something worth acknowledging honestly. Willpower is not a reliable foundation. Most of us have been taught in some way that if we simply wanted something badly enough, if we were disciplined enough, strong enough, committed enough, we would follow through. And when we don't, the conclusion we draw is that we failed, that something is wrong with us. But that conclusion is not accurate. Willpower fluctuates for everyone, always. Some days, focus comes easily. Some days, even simple things feel heavy. Some days, motivation is present and clear. Other days, it quietly disappears. This is simply human. And building a life on something that fluctuates this much creates a kind of instability, where your progress depends more on how you feel on a given morning than on the direction you have chosen. Long-term thinking requires something more reliable than that. This is where the idea of friction becomes useful. Every action carries some level of resistance. Some things are easy to begin, others require effort just to start. And over time, we naturally follow the path of this resistance. Because we are human beings managing limited energy in a complex world. So rather than fighting that tendency, you can work with it. Make the action that matter easier to begin. Reduce the steps, lower the barriers, simplify the process. At the same time, gently increase the resistance around what pulls you off course. Create a little distance, add a little amount of effort, make distraction slightly less convenient. These adjustments may be minor, but they change behavior far more reliably than intention alone. Because when the right action becomes easier to start, consistency becomes more natural to sustain. And consistency is what makes long-term thinking real. This does not need to be complicated. If your health matters, prepare your environment to support it. If learning matters, make it easy to begin before the day takes over. If deep work matters, reduce interruptions before they have a chance to appear. These are small acts of design, intentional design. They require thoughtfulness, not perfection. And over time, they become the structure that holds your intentions in place, even on the days when willpower alone would not have been enough. With the right environment in place, something important begins to shift. You rely less on how you feel and more on what you have built around you. From there, consistency becomes easier to sustain. And that is where long-term thinking starts to take shape in your daily life. With awareness in place and friction reduced, something deeper begins to matter. Consistency over time. Because long-term thinking is a pattern of decisions made again and again over the course of a life. This is where discipline comes in. And the most useful way to think about discipline is as identity. When discipline is treated as effort, it feels heavy. It depends on motivation. It rises and falls with mood. It costs energy just to maintain, and on difficult days, there may not be enough left. But when discipline becomes part of how you see yourself, something changes. Actions feel less like decisions you have to make and more like expressions of who you are. The question changes. Rather than asking, what do I feel like doing today? The question becomes, who am I becoming through this choice? That shift is gentle, but it's significant. Because identity creates a kind of gravity. It pulls you back toward your direction, even when motivation falters. It makes consistency feel less like a daily battle and more like a natural return. There's a story that brings all of this to life in a way few others can. Warren Buffett bought his first stock at 11 years old, 3 shares of a company called Cities Service, with the money he had saved himself. At the end of 2025, he stepped down as CEO of Berkshire Hathaway at the age of 95. The company he had spent 6 decades building from a struggling textile mill into one of the largest enterprises in the world. That is more than 80 years of showing up. But here's the part of the story that rarely gets told. For most of those decades, the world was not watching. There was no legend yet, no Oracle of Omaha, no annual gathering of tens of thousands traveling to hear him speak. Just a man in a room, reading, thinking, making the next decision as carefully as he could. And this is where something important needs to be said. Greatness is almost never visible when it is being built. The person living it does not wake up each morning and think, I'm becoming great. They are simply trying to get better, to make a sound decision today, to be a little more right tomorrow than they were yesterday. We observed this in our Path to Greatness series on Kobe Bryant, Walt Disney, and Coco Chanel. Greatness, in that sense, is not a destination you aim for. It is a byproduct of a life lived with consistent intention. And here is the tension that quietly undoes so many people. The gap between starting and being recognized can be so vast, so long, so silent, that most people stop. Because this lack of recognition felt like evidence that it was not working. 30 years into Buffett's career, most people had no idea who he was. 50 years in, many still did not. The compounding was happening. The process was strong, but visibility, what we often mistake for proof, came much later. So if you are in the early or middle chapters of building something real and the world has not yet noticed, that is not a sign to stop. It may simply be a sign that you are exactly where the real work gets done. And this is what I keep returning to personally. You cannot control when results appear. You cannot control when others begin to see what you are building. What you can control is the quality of your next decision and the one after that. Make the best decision you can right now with what you have. Then make the next best decision and the one after that. This is not just a strategy for long-term thinking. This is for something more important. It is a way of building a life worth living. This is what makes long-term thinking real. Choosing a direction, designing your environment to support it, building an identity around it, and continuing to show up, especially in the quiet chapters when no one is watching and results are nowhere to be seen. Long-term thinking is revealed over time through the choices you continue to make. Here's today's insight. Long-term thinking becomes real when it is lived. Understanding this is only the beginning. The real work is in showing up, in choosing the same direction repeatedly, in continuing even when the results are not yet visible, in accepting something important. Outcomes are never guaranteed, and uncertainty is always part of the process. So the goal is to build something you can return to, a process you can learn from, improve, and trust over time. One that moves you steadily closer to what matters to you. So, rather than asking, do I know what to do? A more useful question might be, am I showing up consistently for what I already know matters? Because over the long run, what shapes your life is what you consistently do. Let's bring this home. Long-term thinking often sounds simple. Most people understand its importance. The real challenge begins after that, in the gap between understanding and action, between knowing and doing, between the life you are capable of building and the one that gets built by default. We explored how that gap forms, how short-term pressures quietly shape behavior, how consistency becomes difficult to sustain when willpower is the only tool available, and how the long silence between effort and visible results can often create doubt in even the most committed people. The path forward, though, is not complicated. Choose a direction that matters to you deeply, not just in theory. Design your environment to make the right actions easier. Build your identity around the person who shows up consistently for what they believe in and keep going. Even when the progress feels slow, even when outcomes remain uncertain, even when no one is watching yet. Because over time, those small, repeated choices begin to compound. They shape your skills, they shape your character, they shape the life you're building. One decision at a time. So as you move into the days ahead, I want to leave you with this. Where in your life do you already know what matters, but are not yet showing up for it consistently? And what is one small thing you could change starting today to make that a little easier? If you prefer to revisit today's ideas in writing, the compass is the published companion to each episode, a concise reference you can return to. You'll find it at MaisonTSD.com. And if these conversations are adding something to your journey, the simplest way to make sure you never miss one is to follow the show wherever you listen. Think of it as reserving your seat in the sanctuary. As always, thank you for choosing to spend this time here with me. Your future self is being shaped by the choices you make today. Stay focused on your direction and take time to discover joy along the way. Until next time, make your next best decision and keep moving forward.